So what we can see here is the knight on d2 is blocking the way of the bishop from c1 and the queen from d1. She wants to be guarding the pawn on d4, but that's not going to happen when the knight is standing here. Also, the knight is not as active as standing on c3, but it has its own pluses. We'll see what are those good things behind having knight there. But first, we'd like to also criticize the other classical line, when the knight standing on c3. Let's see the main problem comparing with the knight on d2. So knight f6, the same way as what black plays in case of knight e2 mainly. e5, the knight goes back to d7, and now black is ready to push c5, which cannot be easily met by the other white's pawn supporting the pawn on d4, meaning c3, because the knight is standing in its way. On c3, so it must move away. That means probably to e2, which is going to cause other kind of problems. So white is in kind of a, not really in trouble, because there are ways and ways to organize from this moment onwards, but in all of those cases, or in most of them, the pawn on d4 is going to abandon basically the board. A is going to be traded for the pawn on c7, c5 actually, and if you're not happy with that situation, you may choose to go with the knight standing on d2. So that's one of the main reasons, but we'll see now what's the other one. So let's go and see how it works when we have our knight on d2. Knight on d2, black plays knight f6 again, which is not the only move, but we'll cover other moves after. e5, knight e7, and the bishop goes to d3. This is the best by far place for the bishop because it's controlling a lot of squares from here. c5, finally black strikes in the center, the same way as we saw before, and white is ready now to play c3 without any delay, without preparation. Everything seems fine, the pawn chain is formed, and we have nothing to worry about for the time being as white. Knight goes to c6, and now we go with the knight from g1 somewhere. I'd like to ask you to guess what's going to be a better of those two squares for it. If we place it on f3, then it's doing a good job defending this two and possibly jumping to g5 at some point, basically involving in the attack against the black's king on g8. We're going to be attacking the king side because we have this pawn chain. As you know, you draw the arrow like that and you see the side of the board where you like to create an attack on. That's basically telling you where you have more space. Okay, so we may go there and the knight may be active, but there is a problem. We're going to create to another piece of our own, and that's going to be the knight on d2. That knight can only go to f3. Realistically speaking, without any special effort, we can use that square for the knight from d2. So knight from g1 can go to e2 instead, leaving this square for the other knight. So, and just remember one thing, this is the ideal setup, the best thing I could actually throughout my whole career. I kind of concluded this playing as black and white, the French, more like with black than white, but my conclusion is that this knight setup is the best by far for white, and you'll see what these knights can do soon enough. So bishop e7, knight f3, there it is. Both of these knights are doing a great job defending these critical pawns, and you'll see soon they're gonna contribute to the attack. Castles, and then we have knight f4. This knight on f4, you'd want to remember how powerful it is. For one, it's gonna be actually attacking the king when it comes to h5, which is very useful, potentially sacrificing on g7 or combining with another piece. It can be really dangerous for black. The other thing that the knight is doing from f4 is that it's putting pressure on e6 so that the pawn on f7 cannot really move. And it really wants to move to f5 or f6, freeing up some space and getting better communication with their pieces on the left part of the board by removing the pawn of white from e5. But that's not going to happen while white keeps the knight on f4. So that's another good reason of creating such situation for the knights. Let's see what happens in case black really plays not really well, but just ignores these threats of white and and doesn't take this position that seriously. So like let's say they think they have enough time to play something like rook e8 with the idea of putting the bishop back on f8 or the knight there, and then striking with f6 or f5. Let's say we do, well, what we do is maybe h4 even. h4 is a very interesting French defense, typical French defense move when you feel like you have a lot of space, you have an excellent concentration of pieces on the king side, that you feel like it's time to start a really good attack and involve even the rook into it. Like for example, the rook can lift to the third rank, swing to the g file, and then it's gonna be a really powerful piece. There are other ways to involve the rook, but we'll see soon. So we have actually already two knights close to the black's king. We have this bishop eyeing h7, the other one from c1 to h6, and the queen potentially ending up on h5. So there are plenty of pieces of white ready to attack. Queen b6. Let's say the black just ignores the threats, ignores what's happening on the other side of the board. Let's say they're just trying to put pressure on the typical weakness in white's camp, which is the pawn on d4. But it's not going to be enough time for black to organize anything there, and you can pause now and try to guess the move for white that completely crushes black here. And now we're going to see it, because it's not that a big deal, but it's going to be Greek gift here, typical bishop takes h7. It's the time for it, because obviously black has no pieces on the king side, and we have really like already too many of those, I would say. Knight g5, we don't even need it actually, knight on f4 for this to work. Knight g5, and then whatever they do, let's say king g8, we go with the queen to h5, threatening queen h7 check. After king f8 we have queen h8 mate, and also we are threatening f7 pawn. I don't really know what they can do here to survive. I think there is no way out of that position. It's going to be mate in a couple of moves. So that's really bad for black. That's really ended quickly, escalated in just a couple of moves after the opening, after the placing these knights on their optimal places, and also the bishop on, don't forget about d3 square. That's the best thing you can get for your light square bishop. And of course try to stay there, try to survive with it, because it's going to be always one of the main pieces in your attack against the black's king. So this is what can happen, and that's another benefit of having knight on d2 over having it on c3, because it's going to f3 while the other knight goes to e2. Don't forget about this maneuver with the knights, and after that, as you saw, the knight goes to f4, creating beautiful chances for attack, but also a beautiful way to constrict black further, because there is no f6 nor f5 unless they played it earlier in the game. Other than this way of playing that black used, as we know, we saw the line with knight f6, which I'm not saying it's I'm not saying that this exact way that we saw here is the way to go for black, because this is also already a little bit more passive approach than what we'd want to as black. I'm not going to go deeper into it and show you how black should play this variation, but I wanted to show you only the ideal setup of white and the power behind it. So you're going to try to get that kind of situation, and you're not going to regret getting the pieces to those places. But other than this, the other ways are possible for black, and I'd like to just mention one that is, I think, the most principal way of playing against the knight on d2. And it goes this way. The story goes like the knight's being placed passively, mainly passively, because it's going to be blocking the bishop, as we said, the queen as well, and it's not controlling the way it could from c3. It is not controlling the central squares that much. So it's passivizing remaining other pieces of white, and itself is not as active as it could be. That means that the center is abandoned or neglected by white, and black is going to strike there without any delay with c5. So I would say this is the way to go as black, if you'd ask me. And in case of c5, white still is going to try to get an advantage, and that may happen after typical e takes d5. I'm not going to go deeper into this variation, definitely, but I'd like to just show you quickly what kind of situations you can get in as white or black. So here black can respond either by taking with the pawn or with the queen. Whichever way they take, they're going to face a certain kind of a problem. Taking with the queen means the queen is out too early. She's going to be harassed by the white's pieces and pawns. while taking with a pawn means that this pawn most likely is gonna end up isolated, in a sense that white takes eventually on c5 and there is an IQP. In an IQP situation like that, it's gonna be a little advantage, some edge for white, and that's what black may accept to play when facing the Tarrasch with 92.